Marcus Ellison was 39 years old the morning his wife of 11 years called security to escort him from the building he had helped her build from a conference room and a prayer. He had walked in that Tuesday wearing the same gray Carhartt jacket he wore every day, carrying coffee in a travel mug with a dented lid. And when the two guards appeared at his office door, his former office, the one she had reassigned 3 weeks prior without discussion, he understood with the particular clarity of a man who has spent years learning to read structures that something had been engineered long before this moment. She didn't come herself. She sent a memo through HR. Effective immediately. Position eliminated. Severance waived per clause 14B of his employment agreement. An agreement, he now recalled, that her attorney had quietly redrafted 8 months ago. He had signed it without reading it, because in 11 years he had never needed to read the fine print on anything she handed him. He handed over his badge. He picked up his personal items, a photograph of his late grandmother, a worn copy of a book on load-bearing mathematics, a mug that said, "World's okayest engineer," and he placed them in a box that security had already assembled, as if they had known the dimensions of his life and planned accordingly. The divorce papers arrived by courier at 6:14 that same evening. She had, the documents stated, retained the house, the vehicles registered in the company's name, and primary controlling interest of Ellison Ward Solutions, a company whose name still bore half of his. What Delia Ward Ellison did not know, had never thought to ask in 11 years of breakfast and bedsheets and board meetings, was that Marcus had never needed her company. He had built something else entirely. Something she had never seen the blueprints for, and the Rolls-Royce Phantom idling at the curb when he walked out of that building wasn't borrowed. Before we jump into the story, comment where in the world you are watching from and subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you need to hear. The morning light came through the windows of the house on Pembroke Lane in long amber columns, and Marcus Ellison sat at the kitchen table he had built himself from reclaimed oak. Each plank selected, sanded, joined, and drank coffee from a mug that had survived 3 moves and 1 flood. He was, to most people who knew him through Delia's world, a pleasant accessory. Her quiet husband. The structural engineer she had hired before she married him, back when Ellison Ward Solutions was a small construction management firm with 4 clients and an ambition too large for its budget. He had helped her scale it. He had reviewed every contract, approved every load calculation, signed his name to every permitted structure they had built in Charlotte, in Atlanta, in Nashville, and Richmond. His credentials were on the wall of her lobby, framed in simple black, positioned behind the receptionist's desk where visitors rarely looked. His grandmother, Loretta Ellison, had kept a phrase stitched into a small piece of cloth above her kitchen sink in the house in Greensboro, where Marcus had spent his summers. It read, "A tool that does good work doesn't need to announce itself." She had died 4 years ago, and Marcus had the cloth in a small frame in his home office, though Delia had never noticed it or asked what it said. He had met Delia at a structural review meeting in 2013. She had come in sharp and fast and certain of things, and he had liked that about her, the way she moved through a room as though she had already solved the problem before she sat down. She had laughed at something he said about load distribution, a joke that required knowing what load distribution was to find funny, and he had understood then that she was rare. He had loved her, genuinely, the way a man loves something he helped build. That morning, she kissed his cheek before she left. Her mouth was practiced and familiar, and he registered, without commenting on it, the scent of a perfume he did not recognize, not new in a just-purchased way, new in a long-established elsewhere way. The kind of scent that had already been somewhere else before it arrived in his kitchen. His other phone, the one registered to a holding company she had never heard of. The one that handled the calls that had nothing to do with Ellison Ward Solutions, vibrated once in the inner pocket of his jacket. He did not take it out. He finished his coffee and watched the morning settle over the yard, over the deck he had built board by board, over the Japanese maple he had planted the year they moved in, its leaves going red at the edges the way they always did in October. When he got up to leave, he noticed, on the passenger seat of her car through the glass of the garage door, an envelope he had never seen before. Thick, legal-sized, rubber-banded. He did not reach for it. He noted it. He drove to work. He had been at his desk for 40 minutes when his phone rang, the personal one, not the company one. It was a number he recognized. His cousin Deshawn, who worked in commercial real estate and had never called Marcus at the office in 14 years. "You need to call me back," Deshawn said. "Today I'll call you at lunch," Marcus said, and returned to his drawings. But the envelope stayed in his mind with the clean persistence of a structural anomaly, the kind you circle on a blueprint and return to, because it does not resolve itself by being ignored. The documents on the conference room table at Reed, Hartwell and Associates told a story that Marcus Ellison read the way he read any set of blueprints, from the foundation up. He had arrived at lunch. Deshawn was already there, a folder in front of him, his face carrying the expression of a man who has practiced composure and is using it at full capacity. "She filed 3 months ago," Deshawn said quietly. "Kept it out of the county you work in. I found it through a colleague who does filings. Marcus, her attorney, is Jerome Pritchard." Marcus was quiet for a moment. Jerome Pritchard represented Clive Harmon. Yes, he did. Clive Harmon was a Charlotte developer who had gone through a divorce preceding 3 years prior and emerged with assets restructured so cleanly that his ex-wife had received approximately 11% of what the court initially estimated the marital estate to be worth. Marcus did not say anything else. He asked Deshawn for the folder and opened it. The filing claimed the marriage had been irretrievably broken for 2 years. It requested that marital assets, listed as the family home, 2 vehicles, and joint investment accounts, be divided per the terms of the amended employment contract, which had been designed, he now understood, to reclassify a portion of his compensation as contingent rather than earned, reducing his claim on the company's equity by a method that would take a forensic accountant to fully map. She had spent 2 years engineering this, while he had sanded a deck, planted a tree, and kissed her good morning. He handed the folder back to Deshawn. His hands did not shake. His face remained perfectly calm. He asked the waitress for a second coffee, and when it arrived, he sat with it for a long moment before speaking again. "Who else knows? Besides her people?" "No one." "Good," Marcus said. He paid for both lunches, drove back to the office, and spent the remainder of the afternoon completing a structural review for a mid-rise residential project in South End. He was thorough. He was precise. He caught an error in the rebar spacing that 3 other engineers had missed. On the way home, he stopped at the house on Pembroke Lane and went directly to his home office. He opened his laptop. He pulled up the joint account statements going back 18 months. The first transfer had been small. $400, categorized as a vendor payment to a company called Meridian Consulting Partners. He typed the name into his search. The company had no web presence, no registered address that appeared in the state's business database, no traceable identity beyond a routing number. He went back further. 6 months before the first transfer, $3,200. Meridian Consulting Partners, 4 months before that, $1,100. He built the timeline in a spreadsheet, row by row, date by date, amount by amount. Over 22 months, 41 transfers, the total was $74,300. She had been building her exit while sleeping in the same bed as the man she was draining, and she had not been careful because she had not believed she needed to be. He photographed every statement. He forwarded the spreadsheet to an encrypted drive. He sat back in his chair and looked at the Japanese maple through the window, its red-edged leaves perfectly still in the October evening. Then he opened a new folder on his desktop and named it simply Ward. He picked up his phone and called one number. "Patricia," he said when she answered. "I need to come in." Patricia Osei had been practicing family law in Charlotte for 27 years, and in that time she had developed a face that revealed nothing except the precise quality of her attention, which was total. She sat across from Marcus in a conference room on the 14th floor of a building downtown and read through what he had assembled with the focus of a woman who understood that documents were weapons and that the quality of the ammunition determined the outcome of the war. "The employment contract amendment," she said without looking up, "is aggressive, but it's not airtight." She turned a page. "They assumed you'd accept the framing. They assumed you had no independent standing. They assumed wrong," Marcus said. Patricia set down the papers and looked at him directly. "Tell me about the other structure." Marcus had spent the better part of a decade before he met Delia doing two things: designing load-bearing systems for mid to large commercial buildings, and quietly accumulating equity in the real estate those buildings occupied. Not through Ellison Ward Solutions, through a separate LLC registered in Delaware, managed through a trust his grandmother's attorney had helped him establish in 2009 when Loretta Ellison had transferred to him. Without announcement, a sum of money she had spent 40 years accumulating in a savings account at a credit union in Greensboro. The trust was not a secret. Technically, it simply had never come up because Delia had never asked about his finances before they married, and the prenuptial agreement she had proposed, which Marcus had signed, pertained only to Ellison Ward Solutions and the jointly titled marital home. His LLC. His trust. His 11 buildings across 4 states. His portfolio, which had grown to a current value that Patricia confirmed after reviewing the documentation he provided, stood at just under $4 million. She never did any due diligence, Patricia said, and there was something in her voice that was not quite admiration and not quite disbelief. She didn't think she needed to, Marcus said. Patricia nodded. "We file a response by end of week. We request full financial disclosure from both parties. When her team produces what they believe is a complete picture of your assets and it doesn't match what we're holding, they will have a very uncomfortable conversation with their client." She paused. "The $74,000 in transfers to the shell company is conversion. That's a separate claim." "I know," Marcus said. "Do you want to pursue it?" "I want it documented," he said. "Every dollar." Patricia made a note. She looked up once more before he left. "Marcus, you handled this the right way. You didn't move. You didn't react. You didn't give them anything to work with. That matters." He thanked her and left, and in the elevator down he thought of his grandmother's cloth above the sink. A tool that does good work doesn't need to announce itself. 2 days later, he drove to Greensboro. His great-uncle Raymond, 81 years old and still precise in the way of men who had spent their lives doing careful work, was in his backyard when Marcus arrived, turning the soil around a row of late-season tomatoes. Raymond listened. He did not interrupt. When Marcus finished, the old man was quiet for a long moment, his hands resting on the handle of a garden spade. "She found the man she wanted and used the one she had," Raymond said at last. "That's an old story. The ending depends entirely on which man knew what he was carrying." "I know what I'm carrying," Marcus said. Raymond nodded. "Then you already know the ending." He reached into the pocket of his work shirt and produced a folded piece of paper. Deshawn found this. That company she's been paying? Meridian Consulting? The registered agent traces to a man named Garrett Holloway. He's a marketing director at a firm in Raleigh. Drives a black BMW, lease registered to a business address. He also filed for Chapter 13 bankruptcy protection 14 months ago. Marcus unfolded the paper. He looked at it for a long time. He's not doing this for love, Raymond said. He's doing this for the settlement. He needs what she promised him. Marcus folded the paper carefully and put it in his jacket pocket. He stayed for dinner. He helped Raymond stake the tomatoes. He drove back to Charlotte in the dark, and the entire way he felt the particular calm of a man who has surveyed the complete landscape of a problem and identified every load-bearing point. That Friday evening, he sat at the reclaimed oak table and ate dinner with Delia. She had made pasta. She talked about a new contract in Richmond, a residential development, city-funded affordable housing. She asked him what he thought about the project timeline. He told her it sounded promising. He asked questions. He listened to her answers. He helped clear the plates. She kissed him on the cheek before she went upstairs, and he stood in the kitchen he had built and listened to her footsteps overhead and thought about load-bearing structures and the precise weight they were designed to carry and how long any structure holds when its foundation has been quietly removed. He was patient. He had always been patient. Preparation is the work. The mediation was scheduled for a Thursday morning in October at the offices of Holloway, Reed and Sims on Trade Street. Delia had requested the location. Neutral ground, her attorney had said. Marcus had agreed without comment. He arrived 12 minutes early. Patricia was already there, 2 bankers' boxes on the table in front of her, her reading glasses on. A yellow legal pad to her left with 3 columns of notes in small, precise handwriting. Beside her sat an accountant named Gerald, who worked in forensic finance and had spent the previous 9 days producing a document that ran to 41 pages. Delia arrived at the precise scheduled time, with Jerome Pritchard at her shoulder and a second attorney Marcus did not recognize. She wore a charcoal blazer and the expression of a woman who believed she was walking into a procedure that had already been decided. She did not look at Marcus directly when she sat down. Garrett Holloway was not there. This was, Marcus knew, a strategic calculation on Pritchard's part. Keep the personal element absent. Frame it as a clean business dissolution. The first 20 minutes were procedural. Pritchard presented the amended employment contract, the asset schedule, the restructuring of Marcus's compensation. His framing was polished, practiced, and built on a single foundational assumption, that the marital estate consisted of what both parties had disclosed, and that Marcus's disclosures were complete. Patricia waited until Pritchard had finished. Then she opened the first banker's box. She produced the transfer records first. 41 transfers over 22 months, each one documented, each one traced to its destination, each one tied by Gerald's analysis to an LLC whose registered agent was a man named Garrett Holloway, who was currently in an active Chapter 13 bankruptcy proceeding and who had received in total $74,300 in funds originating from a joint marital account. Pritchard's face changed, not dramatically, but measurably. Patricia produced the bankruptcy filing next. Garrett Holloway's name was on the cover page. Delia's name appeared in a section on page 11 that Marcus had found the previous week, buried in a list of creditors owed personal loans. She had loaned him money. Marital money. While planning to transfer the marital assets into a structure that excluded Marcus from recovery. Delia's second attorney, the one Marcus hadn't recognized, leaned close to Pritchard and said something in a low voice. Pritchard's jaw tightened. Then, Patricia opened the second banker's box. "Mr. Ellison," she said, addressing Marcus formally for the room's benefit. "Would you like to describe the structure of the Loretta Ellison Family Trust?" Marcus looked at Delia for the first time since she had sat down. She was looking at the table. Then she looked up, and he saw on her face the particular expression of a person solving a problem and arriving, too late, at an answer that recontextualizes everything preceding it. "The Loretta Ellison Family Trust was established in 2009, Marcus said. "It holds equity positions in 11 commercial properties across North Carolina, Georgia, Virginia, and Tennessee. The trust predates our marriage by 4 years. It was not included in the prenuptial agreement because it was not jointly held. Its current value, as of last month, is $3,940,000. The room was quiet. She had no idea, Patricia said, more for the record than for the room. Delia's hands were flat on the table. Jerome Pritchard was writing something, but his pen had stopped moving. The second attorney was already looking at her phone. "Jerome," Delia said quietly. "Don't," Pritchard said, equally quiet. She turned to Marcus. He watched her face move through several things: calculation, recalibration, and then, briefly, something that might have been genuine. "Marcus, we're done with the personal portion of this," Marcus said. He did not raise his voice. He spoke the way he had always spoken in professional rooms, with the calm clarity of a man who had already solved for the variable everyone else was still trying to identify. "Patricia has the full financial disclosure package. Gerald's forensic analysis of the Meridian transfers has been shared with the district attorney's office as of yesterday afternoon. The conversion claim is separate from the divorce proceeding, and it moves on its own timeline." He stood. He gathered nothing, because he had brought nothing he needed to keep. "The company bears my name," he said. "It was built on my credentials. When you remove my professional standing from Ellison Ward Solutions, what remains is a firm with no licensed structural engineer and a portfolio of projects that require one. You can have it. I won't fight you for it. I'm building something else." He looked at her once more. Not with anger, not with satisfaction, with the clean finality of a man who has set down something heavy and chosen not to pick it up again. "You picked the wrong man to plan around," he said. "I know how structures fail. I also know how to build things that last." He walked out. The door closed behind him without a sound. 7 months later, Marcus Ellison stood on the deck of a house in Dilworth he had purchased outright. A 1940s craftsman bungalow he had spent 3 months restoring himself. Board by board, beam by beam, choosing each material for its integrity rather than its appearance. The bamboo floors had taken 2 weekends. The porch columns had taken 1. The kitchen, rebuilt entirely, had taken the better part of February. He was drinking coffee. The morning was still and cool, and the Japanese maple he had transplanted from the house on Pembroke Lane. Delia had not wanted it in the settlement. She had not known what it was worth to him. It was deep red now, fully settled in its new soil, its roots already established. A woman named Renee had come out of the back door and was standing at the edge of the garden with her own coffee, looking at the rows of garlic he had pressed into the soil the previous weekend. She was an architect, quietly precise, with a habit of asking questions that had more thought in them than they appeared to. She had not asked him about the divorce. She had asked him, on their second conversation, why he had gone back to structural work after running a firm. And he had told her the truth. because he liked problems that had load-bearing answers, and she had laughed in the same way Delia had laughed 11 years ago. Except it came from a different place entirely. He had heard about Delia through Deshawn, who heard it from her former assistant. Ellison Ward Solutions had lost its structural certification within 60 days of the mediation, because Jerome Pritchard had, in the course of attempting to acquire a new engineer to replace Marcus, inadvertently revealed to the North Carolina Licensing Board that the company's existing certification had been improperly maintained. The Richmond contract had fallen through. The Raleigh office had closed. Delia was managing a mid-sized commercial property firm in Greensboro now. Not her firm. Someone else's. An administrative role. Her LinkedIn page had been updated twice in 6 months. Garrett Holloway had resolved his bankruptcy in a manner his attorney described to the court as a full liquidation of personal assets. He had relocated to Columbia, South Carolina, where he was reportedly managing social media for a chain of mattress stores. Her mother had not spoken to her since the mediation. Her mother had called Marcus directly, 2 weeks after, to tell him she was sorry. He had thanked her and told her it wasn't necessary, and meant it. Marcus poured the last of the coffee into his mug and stood in the morning and watched the maple. Its roots, he knew, were doing what roots do when you give them good soil and enough time. Spreading, deepening, anchoring the whole structure against the weight of whatever weather came. He was solvent. He was free. He was building something worth keeping. There is a kind of patience, his grandmother had told him once, that looks like stillness from the outside, but is nothing like stillness. It is the work that happens before the work. It is the calculation that runs beneath the quiet surface of a man who already knows where every beam is placed, and which one, if removed, brings the whole thing down. He had known. He had waited. He had built. That was enough. That had always been enough. Renee said his name from across the garden, and he turned toward her, and the morning was wide and unhurried and entirely his. I hope you enjoyed that one. Be sure to like the video and subscribe so you don't miss the next story. I've picked out 2 more for you that I think you'll really like.